Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is EJ Spurl. I'm with Black Trident TV, and I'm joined today by Cassie Jaye of Jaybird Productions. Cassie, now you're making a film
Yes.
right now, The Red Pill. Right?
Yes.
I checked out the trailer or the sneak preview, and like honestly, I gotta say, just from my own history, looking at this whole thing between men's rights and feminism, that it was the first time I'd actually seen an honest, like nonpartisan kind of take on that, right? So, could you tell us a little bit about what drew you to that?
Sure. First of all, I'm really glad to hear you say that because I think people who have been involved in the gender politics world for a while online, you guys really do have a rabbit hole of information and have never really seen it put together in a film before. So I was definitely going for getting what most of you guys and girls know out to the public who's never heard about it before.
Mm-hmm.
So what drew me to it was I've always been really interested in gender in the broad scope. My first documentary was about sex education, and it focused on something called purity balls.
Yeah, I actually did. I watched that, actually. I have seen it. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so that was definitely an interesting look into, the pressure on remaining abstinent and sexual choices and that kind of thing. So that was called Daddy I Do, and then I did another film about gay marriage. So from my track record, you can kind of see that I like to focus on gender issues. And so when I decided to make The Red Pill it was in March 2013. And from finishing my film about gay marriage, which was called The Right to Love, we released that in 2012 and had all of our screenings done by, I think, October 2012. And so after October 2012, I was kind of in this blank precipice of where do I go from here. And so I thought a lot about different topics, and one that came up often was rape culture, because there was a lot of articles being written about that and coming through my news feed. Mm-hmm. And since I think maybe some people watching this knew that when I started The Red Pill, I was a feminist and have been a feminist since I was very young or in teens. So, my newsfeed was filling up with rape culture, and I was curious about this. So I considered making that for my next documentary. But while I was researching rape culture, I came across avoiceformen.com. And if you're not familiar with that website, well, I know you are, but if other people aren't familiar with that website, it's kind of a community of men's rights advocates and activists who want to stand up for men's issues, but also have a lot of critiques on feminism. And their reputation was taking a pretty, I guess, at times crass approach to...
It was getting pretty hammered, yeah.
yeah, just, no filter really on what words you can use. So it was a, kind of shocking website for at least me to read at that time. I was kind of terrified and also fascinated, and when I kept on thinking about what next documentary to do, I kept going back to the men's rights movement because I just thought it was absolutely fascinating and it terrified me. And I thought, well, let's see what happens. If anything, it'll make an interesting film. So
no, I can understand that. I can actually understand that. How I initially got involved in it is probably about 10 years ago. I was actually arrested for being a victim of domestic violence, and the police just would not like. I still have the police report, even though I told the police, like, look, she's been hitting me for months. She's been throwing things at me. I have scars. I have like open wounds. None of the stuff I told the police ended up on the police report. Now, I was a kid at the time, didn't know what I was doing. So when it went through to the lawyer, he just said, just plead guilty, and I did it, right? So that's how, like, initially what drew me to become interested in the topic of men's rights. But this was until years later, right? I thought it was just something I was going to have to deal with, and I did. But so that's what drew me to A Voice for Men in the first place. And then I started kind of reading up on a lot of stuff they were saying, and I realized, like, wow, these things aren't talked about. Like, and it was very much like, yeah, like a red pill. Like, it just opened my world up, and I was like I never considered half of these things, and it was amazing. But so let's talk a little bit about like your history. Now, you started as an actress when you were really young. Right? I was kind of peeking at your IMDb page there, and I saw like a couple of student films. Were they or?
Yeah, I did a
Yeah,
lot of low budget.
yeah.
I actually kind of get got pigeonholed in horror films.
That's my favorite genre actually. So yeah, it works.
Yeah, which is really interesting. I mean, I didn't watch them. I didn't prefer to watch them, but they are really fun to work on.
Oh yeah, I've
Yeah.
actually I used to be a PA on some television shows here in Canada. I don't really want to get into detail on which ones because then people could find out my real name, and you know how that goes.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving back to the red pill here, what like were some of the challenges that you experienced in the making of it?
Oh gosh,
Oh
every
God,
step,
yeah.
every step of the way. I mean, I could, kind of divide them into categories. One of the major challenges was my own personal conflict going through this whole journey, which I ended up documenting, and now it's a part of the film. And that was probably the single most difficult conversation. I'm sorry, difficult decision I made while making this film was whether or not to include myself. And I went back and forth so many times, and just because it's like you're putting all of your skeletons out there for the world to see, and I didn't know if I wanted to do that. But at the same time, it was the film I wanted to see of this person going on this journey and thinking about all of it and how it relates to what they believed. So that was difficult to go through. And then as far as making it, the budget has always been a huge struggle. While we were making the film, the whole film was funded out of pocket by myself and my two other producers. And none of us are like rolling in the dough and just to have money to spend. So it was me working on other commercial projects and corporate videos to then make that to put into the red pill. And so, the red pill is really like my fancy car that I was constantly working on. That was a very expensive hobby. So the funding's always been a struggle, and for documentary films, you can submit to film grants, you can bring on new executive producers who can help fund the film or find funding, and those are pretty much your options, just grants and very wealthy individuals. And both we had huge roadblocks. I found with the grant submission process that they have categories where you can submit your film to environmental issues or animal rights or LGBT issues, and then there was a women's issues category, women and girls, and there was none for boys and men. Mm-hmm. So what I would end up submitting to was the human rights category, which is kind of a broad idea, and I'm not sure what other films were being submitted to that, but I felt like the only category I could submit to that would be, accurate, and got denied from about a dozen grants, and never even got to the next round to submit again, because some of them have, you have to go through stages to give more info or give video footage for them to approve you. So that was, frustrating. And then with the individuals who we're trying to see if we could get on as a executive producer, they wanted, rightfully so, I guess, so much creative control for it to be their message, and I really wanted to take a balanced approach because, my journey in itself was very. I wouldn't say it's like the whole thing is unbiased, because my journey would bounce back and forth between biases, and so that's what is shown.
Well, I've seen so far that you intend to really present it in a nonpartisan way, and you even mentioned, I think, in the Kickstarter preview there that your end result isn't necessarily going to be the viewers, right? And I actually really respect that, because that's how, like, a nonpartisan, objective way of looking at it, and I really really appreciate that. So now, if you could actually point out like one moment during the making of this film, right, without giving anything away, obviously, because we want people to go watch it, that surprised you the most, what do you think that would be?
my own dismissiveness. But that didn't surprise me until later, now that I can look back and see.
I think I can see a little bit of that in the sneak peek too there, because you were saying, like, sometimes I think they're duping me, and even that, the little part where you were talking to Paul Elam there, right? Like, I think I understand, but there's something. Yeah, no. So I can appreciate that, and I actually had a very similar experience with it myself, because I was, while I was reading on the stuff, I was also hearing the other side, that they were misogynist, that they were this, they were that. But like, once, like, in my own personal experience, once I actually started to talk to these people, I noticed that, like, well, these guys care about women's rights too. It's just that they want to talk about men's rights because they're not being talked about, right? So that's what really kind of sold me on it, and I was like, okay, all right, we can have this discussion, right? So another question about the making here. What was the most unexpected piece of resistance that you were surprised by during the creation?
Unexpressive. Well, I mean, and a lot of people have brought this up since I said this to Milo, but the most common reaction I get is, why are you giving them a platform to speak? Which I still, it just boggles my mind, because it's like, why, even if you disagree with them, let them say their piece, and we should know that the audience is intelligent enough to make their own decision.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, I agree with that. I think that if you can, like, for instance, if a racist were to come up and say, oh, well, this race is inferior, I can prove him wrong. Just by his own words. I can throw them right back and say, well, no, that's incorrect because X, Y, Z. And I think that's the important part with, like, a public, conversation, a discourse, right? Is that we need to actually have that open-mindedness and look at both sides of an issue and then come to a judgment, right? And obviously, with there's facts flowing on both sides of this coin. Sometimes they're facts, sometimes they're facts, and I think it muddles up the mind sometimes.
Yeah.
And it gets and it becomes very confusing for people. So I understand that. Now, okay, so a friend of mine is one of your $500 backers.
Oh,
right?
Thank you to
So
him or her.
Is it him? I'm pretty sure he'll appreciate you thanking him there.
Thank you so much. Wow.
And he actually had some questions for you, but they were all asked during Big Milo.
Oh.
But he did reiterate one, and he just wanted to know if you experienced anything during the course of this that you would like, you don't have to go too much into detail, that you would characterize as sabotage.
Oh, that's a good question. Sabotage. God, I'm trying to think of how to word it, but I mean, just the amount of,
Yeah, you
like,
obviously don't want to, like, point the finger at anybody, right? So, like,
yeah, well, because it's not even one person or one moment. It's like this flood
collective,
of different people, especially from my own personal life and personal connections, of people. I mean, I hate the word thrown around, threats.
Yeah.
Because it's so muddy when you start getting into online, what's a threat, what's not. But there were, things that were said that were like, you'll regret this, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I've experienced those myself. I know Karen Strawn has experienced a lot of it herself, and she's a woman standing up for men's rights too, right? So it's very interesting in that regard there. Now you're familiar with the concept. Now this is about the Kickstarter campaign here, right? You're familiar with the term a troll pledge?
I wasn't until now.
Okay.
People are talking about it. It's terrifying.
Are you concerned about that at all, or do you think?
Well, now I am. I mean, a part of me thinks, like, okay, I didn't know that you could take away your pledge.
I only found this out the other day myself, actually, so I didn't know.
Yeah. And now, I am very, grateful to the people who have been talking about beware troll pledges, and we need to get higher so that they can't, sabotage this thing. But I'm also wondering, well, now are we telling people that they can do that, and now they're going to use that? Because I don't even know it can happen.
I think you made the smart move there with the, the 114 you were asking for. You got that. Right, so that was the first stretch goal. Now, And if so, now if the next stretch goal is met, which I'm looking at I actually haven't checked it yet this morning, but I know it was only like 30 or 40,000 away at this point, right?
Yeah.
But or at the point that I last looked. Now, if you meet that stretch goal, is there another stretch goal you have in mind, or are you just going to kind of like everything's just going to make the movie better, you know?
Yeah. Well, part of the reason for the second stretch goal, which is 175,000, a part of the reason for that is when I created that with my producers, I mean, we stayed up all night trying to think of the perfect one that could really impact the film. And I thought, okay, well, let's just go all out. This is the best film we can make. And what would that stretch goal be? And I mean, of course, you can always do more with more money. But I really thought when we decided on 175 that there's no way we're going to meet that. So now we don't have to freak out when we meet our second stretch goal and like scramble to figure out our next stretch goal, because there's no way we're going to meet 175. Now I guess I do have to start thinking of another stretch goal. I know a lot of people want to see some more like maybe kind of hat tips to some people. Milo and
Milo, of course.
maybe adding some very reputable people to the film, which is of course a struggle to think if we can actually handle that, because we don't want to lengthen our production time, because we really want to get out before the U.S. presidential election.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, we are thinking like, what else could we do? And also it has to be a stretch goal that people can easily understand and know the importance of that. But we talked about maybe doing a grassroots screening tour and going state to state to make sure it's screened everywhere. But a lot of our backers are international, so then it's like, okay, a multi-continental screening
Well,
tour.
I know I'd go see it in the theater if it was up here in Canada. I know that for sure. All right, I might even be willing to travel over to the mainland because I live on an island. So
You're in Vancouver?
I'm in Victoria, Vancouver Island.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ooh,
So
lucky.
it's beautiful here. I absolutely love it. There's no winter. It's great.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But anyways, okay. So I got a couple more questions here for you, and then we're gonna cut this short. Okay. So now, I just caught on to this morning, but there was an open letter posted to you. Sorry, I love the reaction. There was an open letter posted to you there. Did you even bother responding to that guy, or did you just like?
Uh, you know, I think I can say this. I won't say her name, but I think I can say this happened. So one of the feminists featured in the film sent that link to me when it came out, and basically saying, "Is this true?" And so I read it, and it's very interesting spin on how David Futrell wanted to write his article.
It seemed absolutely absurd to me, the way what he was suggesting. Yeah, basically, for the viewers who haven't seen it, David Futrell, We Hunted the Mammoth, basically wrote an open letter to Cassie here, saying that because she was taking Kickstarter funds to fund the film, that it was MRAs that were now going to control the creative direction. And it's Kickstarter. That's not how it works,
Yeah, and the film is filmed. I mean, it's done. It's the story. Now we just have to put it together, but it's not going to affect the way I put it together. The story is done.
Well, that's important. Yeah.
Yeah. So and also I would like to point out that MRAs do not make up the majority of our backers. It's people who are standing up for freedom of speech, and a lot of middle of the road people. Actually, almost all of our 5 associate producers now who gave $10,000 are middle of the road, neither label. So anyways, yeah, that was that letter. So one of the feminists in the film sent me that, and she asked, "Is this true?" And so I wrote it all out to her privately, explaining each point that David Futrell brought up that was untrue. And so she said that she would go and talk to him and bring all this up, and she believes that this film needs to be made and completed. And she also said that she thinks he should still remain in the film, and she went and told him that. I guess what his response was, I'll think about it. But, you know, whatever whatever he wants to do.
You know what? I get it though. Actually, I have a lot of friends in my personal life who are feminists that actually I've talked to about this film. They want to see it too because I've talked to them about men's rights issues and they're on board with me, right? So it's actually it's actually surprising to see this weird like dichotomy between like the real world experiences that people have and then the online culture behind it. It's a lot of vitriol thrown around. But when I go and talk to these people at my local coffee shop, we're having a conversation. There's no hate. There's no you're an evil misogynist, anything like that. Mind you, I don't specifically identify as an MRA, even though I kind of advocate for it, and I have done a little bit of activism on behalf of men's rights. So I guess that makes me an MRA by definition. I don't know how it works, but I identify personally. Like the label I'd put on myself is egalitarian, right? Mm-hmm. But anyway, so you'd like to get the film out by the next presidential election, right? Now, Milo's going to hate me for this, but I really hope it's not Trump. Anyways, us here in Canada, we pay more attention to American politics than our own. I swear to God, no lie. But anyways, so but beyond that, once you get this film in the can, it's out there, it's being shown in theaters. Do you have any plans for what's next?
Once it's out and
you're free
like,
of
all right. Well, I have thought about depending on the reactions to this film and how a lot of people are warning me like you're going to get a lot of bad reactions. So I have thought about like, okay, going into hiding and maybe an island somewhere. I have, maybe. But I mean, even one Hollywood producer, a big name, emailed me privately saying, "You're making the film I wish I could make, but it would be career suicide." And I'm glad to have his support that he believes this film needs to be out there. But a lot of people are saying it is career suicide. But maybe I'll make some cat videos and like I don't know.
Go viral, make your millions. Yeah, no, okay, cool. So all right, so I guess this last question, okay, and this is your chance to affect some young minds. Okay, what advice do you have for anybody who wants to get into documentary filmmaking?
You got to be willing to live like a pauper.
A what now? Sorry.
A pauper.
A pauper, like a pill popper, like.
No, sorry. Like a peasant.
A pauper. Okay, P-A-U-P-E-R. Okay, all right. I was like,
just be able
Canadian,
to be open to living very frugally because it's a tough life. You're not going to have the fancy cars. You're not going to go on trips. Your life is your work, and just make sure every topic you pick is something that absolutely inspires you and keeps you interested and motivated, because that's the fuel behind the documentary is your own passion and fire for the topic. And also always make the film you want to see. A lot of people are going to give feedback about what they would do differently, and everyone has an opinion. The only opinion that matters is, do you love this film if you saw this made by someone else? But yeah, and then also get really good at up and coming technology, because that may be your bread and butter job, is keeping up with ways to do editing or sound mixing or composing or whatever else to be able to fund your projects, because you won't always have an easy time finding funding.
For sure. Yeah, my daughter's 18 right now, and because I do have a little bit of a background in filmmaking, and I do want to explore. Actually, I have a few ideas in mind for documentaries that I'd like to make. Right. So that question was more for me than it was for kids, but still.
Helping the kids.
What's that?
Helping the kids.
Helping the kids out. It's what I do. I'm a giver. I'm like Milo. I'm a giver. But she's 18 right now, so she'll be out on her own pretty soon. And that's actually something that I really would like to explore is going out and actually making documentaries. Probably you know what, the quality I saw from the trailer here is probably going to be nothing like the quality of stuff I make. But yeah, that is something that I would like to pursue, and your film definitely helped inspire that. Right. I actually have been following you for a couple of years now. Yeah,
Really?
yeah. Well, I first heard about the red pill back, I think it was the beginning of 2014. Yeah, it
Wow.
was the beginning of 2014 is when I first heard about it, and I was just like, this looks like a really cool project. This looks like a really
Wow.
cool idea, right? And I was kind of wading through a lot of the people who are like, oh, she's just going to tell a one-sided story. Oh, you're going to this. I'm like, guys, it's not even out yet. We don't know yet, right? And honestly, I would much prefer like to see your specific, as the filmmaker, see your journey. And I think it's beautiful that you've personalized it in such a way, right? So yeah, no, I definitely will be seeing it. I know my buddy's going to be getting a signed thank you letter and
Yeah.
and a copy. So maybe I'll just go over to his place and watch it with him. But yeah. So Cassie Jaye, Jaybird Productions, filmmaker behind The Red Pill. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. This
No
was fun.
worries. Okay.